All right, I have had the Oppo Find N5 in my possession for a couple of days now, and I have been using it as intensely as I can. And man, I have a lot of thoughts to share, but I think I need to start first with the idea of importing. How has that gone for me? So this device was supplied to me by the Average Dad Tech. Right now, it is basically on loan from them. Thanks, Michael. And I'm trying to decide if I want to actually purchase the thing or not. A lot more on that to come. It is the global variant. And let me just tell you that if I didn't know that it was an imported phone, I probably would have no indication that that was the case. Everything is perfectly normal. I do use Mint Mobile as my carrier, and that means that I'm using T-Mobile's towers. Now, this phone does not have band 71, and for T-Mobile, that can be important. My understanding is that band 71 is basically their long-range band, and so if you're in a rural area with sort of subpar coverage, that might be a big issue for you. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and so far, everywhere I've been, things have been largely fine. I will say that the other day, I was in Walmart for something, and my stuff was loading very, very slowly. I was trying to get into their app to find out where an item was, what aisle it was on, and it just would not load me into stuff. And that's something that you're going to see occasionally with the lack of band 71. For your particular carrier, I know I'm going to get out of this question, does it work on Verizon? Does it work on AT&T? I don't really have the answer to that question. What I would suggest you do is look at the bands listed and then look at your carrier and see what bands they use. Also, if you have the Find N5 and you are using Verizon, AT&T, whatever it might be, drop a comment down below and let people know if it's working or not. That's really the best I can do. I can't really just go get SIMs for every carrier and pop it in there. That would be a little difficult to pull off. But at the end of the day, the idea of importing this thing really seems kind of daunting, but it's not that bad, guys. You're going to go on one of these stores like Average Dad Tech. I'll put a link in the description down below. You buy the thing, it shows up, you pop your SIM in, and it seems like it's working fine. I'll just start by saying this. From the hardware perspective, holding this phone, using it, doing things on it, it feels absolutely immaculate. More so than any folding phone I've ever used, this just feels like a normal phone. It is so thin. Even with this case on, which by the way it comes with in the box, it just feels like a normal phone. It's so light, it's so thin, and that absolutely makes a big difference. I love how big that inner screen is. It's absolutely huge, and that is really cool to have in your pocket at all times. I'll even say that the camera bump really doesn't bother me too much anymore. Now, obviously, there's a case on here, and that is kind of diminishing it a little bit. We'll pop that off to make things more fair. Yes, it's a big camera bump, right? But if you compare that to the OnePlus Open, it's a smaller camera bump. It's not as tall, and it's not as, big across. The diameter is not as big. Now, obviously, shrinking your camera components can have a negative impact. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. But the camera bump is noticeably smaller. Everything about this phone, hardware-wise, feels absolutely fantastic. The hinge feels nice. It has a decent amount of grip, but it's not particularly hard to open. And much like the OnePlus Open, once you get to about right here, it's just going to kind of fling itself open the rest of the way. It's going to open up pretty much 180 degrees flat, although that might sort of change as time goes on. Looking at these two straight down from the top, it's just so impressive. It's so impressive how thin this phone is. And the case that it comes with, I actually quite like. It's magnetic over here on the side. This can kind of just pop up and it covers the hinge. And when you open it up, it just sort of slides out of the way and is totally fine. It gives you a little bit of grip, a little bit of protection. This is a perfectly solid case, and you got it for free. Performance in general is very, very fast. The animations all look very good. Granted, I'm not someone that uses applications that are super, super heavy. I don't, do my video editing on my phone or anything like that. But everything that I do normally is just super fast and super smooth. Of course, you can do things like split screen multitasking, and all of this is just so exceptionally smooth. Grab your taskbar down here and throw a third app in. I keep saying this, but it's just such a performant device. The Snapdragon 8 Elite is no joke. The animations are tuned really, really nicely. And we have some nice little changes going from the OnePlus Open to the Oppo Find N5. I talked about this in another video, which probably isn't out yet. But if you swipe up and hold, split view and floating window are up here in the corner. Before, floating window was here, so I would frequently accidentally open up a floating window. Now you have to actually put it to one corner or the other. That, I think, is a much better system. We've got this handle up here at the top, which gives us a handful of options as well. I like the fact that the taskbar now has this floating option. It just stays out of your way when you don't need it. In limited testing, battery life has been really solid for me as well. Yesterday, you can see here, it was 8:56 p.m. I had 35% battery left, and I had, let's just say, 5 hours of screen on time. We're on pace for 6.5, give or take, hours of screen on time, which is perfectly reasonable for me. Honestly, that's not too far from my other foldables, my Pixel, my Open, my Z Fold 6, maybe a little bit better. It's important to point out that you do have 80-watt wired charging, although I've not been able to take advantage of that because the charger that came in the box does not work with North American plugs, but still, it should be an option theoretically. There is a ton to like about this device in several different ways. It's the best foldable that I've ever used. But unfortunately, there are a couple of places that are fairly important to me where this device has taken a step back, a step in the wrong direction, even compared to the OnePlus Open. And this was done in the name of achieving that incredible thinness. We're talking about the cameras, and we're talking about the speakers. And let's just start with the speakers here because I can do it from this view. This device is so thin, you just don't have a lot of room for these speakers to resonate. And another change that I don't love is that you have one speaker here, and this is on the cover display side, and you have the other speaker here, again, on the cover display side, and the result of that is when it's open, both of your speakers are here, one there and one there. I've complained about this with the Z Fold 6, and the same exact complaint is true for me here. If I'm watching content and I'm just holding my phone like this, all of the audio is coming out of the left-hand side, and it sounds weird. With the OnePlus Open, you had two speakers functioning up top, so left and right, and then you had another speaker on the bottom. One of these grills does not actually produce sound. I forget which one it is. It doesn't actually matter. But you had three speakers, and the result of that was it was loud, it was bassy, and you had true stereo sound no matter how you positioned the device. With this is not stereo sound. Yes, I can rotate it and I can get stereo sound that way, but other devices like the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, heck, even Surface Duo figured this out by putting one speaker here and then the other speaker here. They're off-centered from one another. So this way you have left and right audio, left and right audio, left and right audio. Do you see what I'm saying? No matter how you orient the device, you have a left and right channel. You don't have that here. So not only do these speakers sound quieter than the Open, not only do they have less bass, a less fuller sound than the Open, they are also in an orientation that I don't love. If you want to hear an audio sample for that, comparing these two, I did that in my unboxing and first impressions. I'll put a link to that video with that timestamp in the description down below. But now it's time to talk briefly about these cameras. So I already posted a pretty long video comparing the Oppo Find N5 cameras to the OnePlus Open, so I'm not going to rehash this here. I'm just going to show you a couple of new samples that just sort of quickly hammer home what I don't like about this camera system. This shot, as you can see here, was from the Oppo Find N5, and I think the best way to just show you is to now show you the same shot on my OnePlus Open. Like I said in that other video, this is going to be subjective, but to me, this is the far more pleasing shot. The Oppo shot has cranked the contrast, the brightness, the sharpness up to an unpleasant level for me. It's like they've grabbed that clarity slider in Google Photos and just cranked it up to 11. This is just too much. It's over-sharpened, and it's too bright. It is not that bright. It was not that bright in that corner. This looks much, much more accurate. And like I said in that other video, don't confuse sharpness for detail. You might look at this shot and think that it has more detail than this shot because of the sharpness. But if you actually zoom in and look for individual strands of fur, and now let's compare this to the OnePlus Open shot, what you're going to find is the Open is resolving more detail. It's just that the Oppo Find N5 is sharpening everything to such an extreme that at first blush it might look like it's got more detail. I mean, they're basically taking the results of the MKBHD blind camera test and applying that logic to their camera setup. But I think that if there were shadows in real life, there should be shadows in the shot. Virtually every time I compare the OnePlus Open to the Oppo Find N5, the Find N5 just is so unrealistically bright and it is so overly sharpened. I always end up preferring the OnePlus Open shot. Like I said, this is subjective, but to me, this is not even close. This looks so artificial and fake. This looks so much more natural and so much more pleasing. One more thing kind of quickly, the Oppo Find N5 does across the board use physically smaller sensors, and one of the side effects of this is you have less depth of field, less natural depth of field. Pay attention to this text on this tablet back here, this little magnetic grip. When we go to the Open, see how it's more blurred? There's more bokeh. That is not portrait mode. That is just the result of a physically larger sensor, and that's also something that I miss. I will say that the telephoto macro mode is very, very good, and I'm going to enjoy using this quite a lot. So much depth of field, so much bokeh, getting up so close. I love stuff like this. So that's definitely a big improvement and a big plus. I know people don't buy folding phones to get the best possible camera setup. We are making concessions across the board to get this level of thinness. But I think that it's worth pointing out that generation over generation, every camera got smaller. Every sensor got smaller from OnePlus Open or Oppo Find N3 to Oppo Find N5. And to my eyes, my subjective preference, the camera quality got worse in virtually every way. And that is a bummer for me. And while I don't need the best possible camera, I do need a camera that delivers photos that I like. And again, subjectively, I don't really like the photos that this camera produces. They're not bad photos from some objective preference, but they don't look the way I want them to look. I'm going to need to dig in, maybe play with some filters and so forth, because there's this filter system in the camera that does like a filter before you take the shot. Maybe I can find something that gets me closer to what I'm looking for. Otherwise, it's a problem for me. And again, kind of similarly to those speakers, they're not bad speakers, right? Like no one's going to be like, man, these things are terrible, but they're worse than last year. They're worse than my other foldables. And that's a problem when we're talking about a device that's really, really expensive. Again, like I said, there's so much to like about this phone, right? It is in so many ways the best foldable I have ever used. But those are two really important things for me. The cameras and the speakers really do matter to me a lot. You're going to have your own sort of ways that things are weighted, right? For you, camera may be almost irrelevant. Speakers may be almost irrelevant. And the things that this thing absolutely crushes might be the most important thing. But for me, those two things really matter. And it's two places where this thing just isn't very good. But like I said, we're only a couple of days in, and I'm going to need more time to render my full review, but this might give you a little bit of a hint about where we are going. I'll say in my full review, I'll probably be giving a final judgment on if I'm going to be keeping the thing or not. That's kind of what this is all going to hinge around. Is it good enough for me to keep when I have the Open, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, the Z Fold 6, and the Z Fold 7's coming, and the Pixel 10 Pro Fold is coming? Is it good enough to warrant dropping that cash? Subscribe so that you don't miss out on that content. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. I'll see you on the next one, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.